Well, we have another wonderful show ready for you today, and I hope you've got some track shoes on today, because, folks, we're going to go 90 miles an hour through this. We're going to talk about 20 logic errors used by evolutionists when discussing the subject of creation evolution. And, you know, we also find a lot of these errors, these logic errors, in the textbooks. So we're going to be going through that, and this is Mike Riddle, your host, and we're talking about Creation Matters. This is the show that teaches the scientific and biblical truths about creation. In the beginning, God created. You know, that's probably the most scientific statement ever made. I don't think anybody's going to ever beat that. In the beginning, God created. And I'd like to start, does anybody out there have any real observable evidence of evolution? I'd like to know, does anybody out there have any real observable evidence for evolution before we get into these 20 logic errors? If you think you have some real evidence, give us a call at 800-955-8200. That's our phone number, 800-955-8200. Or do you believe that evolution has nothing to stand on? We'd like to hear from you today. Is there absolutely no observable evidence for evolution? And I think we're going to see that as we go through some of these logic errors used by evolutionists. 20 logic errors used by evolutionists. And just to make sure that we are going to go about 90 miles an hour, because I want to make sure we try and cover all 20 of these. And if you can't write them down, I have a special person with me here today, called a son-in-law, who's going to put all this on our website tonight. Hopefully tonight. I haven't twisted his arm hard enough yet, but we're going to try and twist it. 20 logic errors. And you can show these to teachers, you can show these to friends, that when they try and argue for evolution or against creation, most of the time they're committing errors and logic errors, or just using bad science. Well, let's start with number one here. I gave this my own personal name here just to kind of keep it easy. It's called fuzzy words. That should make it really easy to understand. Fuzzy words. Now, I'm going to read these fuzzy words off to you, and I'm going to let you know I found every one of these words or phrases in a biology textbook under the chapter labeled evolution. Here's how they're trying to support evolution in our public schools. Here's how they support it. Words like we believe or we think. Does that sound scientific to anybody out there? We believe or we think? How about this one? Given enough time, it will happen. Did you know that is a very unscientific statement? Any teacher that's using that is not talking science anymore. You know what that statement says? Given enough time, it will happen? What they're really saying is, if you phrase it correctly, it says this: we don't know how it happened, but given enough time, we have faith it will. That statement is not science. That's a religious, faith-based statement. Anytime any teacher or anybody says, well, we don't know how it happened, but just given enough time, it will, that's a religious statement. Here's another one I found in a biology textbook under fuzzy words. It might work. Wow, doesn't that sound scientific? Now here's another one. I'm going to give you an example, the actual example I found this on. This is under a modern biology textbook, and here's how they supported evolution. It must have formed. And here's the exact phrase, and I quote, those life forms must have evolved in the absence of oxygen. Doesn't that sound scientific? It must have. Here's another one. Could possibly have been. Now, here's the most scientific one. Here is absolutely the most scientific statement they had in their book to support evolution. My guess is. Can you believe that? That's how they're supporting evolution. You know, anytime you see any of these fuzzy words, and you read these fuzzy words, you know we see them a lot in the press also. That's how the people, when they write these articles to support evolution, you'll find them in the newspapers and journals. Anytime you see these fuzzy words, you should stop and think, wow. What they're saying is they don't have the evidence. If they had the evidence, they wouldn't have to use any of these types of words. They could use we have observed, we have done, we have completed. But no, we're saying we believe, we think, given enough time, might work, must have formed, my guess is, seems like. That's not science. That's faith. So the use of fuzzy words clearly demonstrates the evolutionists don't have the evidence to support their claims. You know, folks, great claims require real evidence. But all I see in these textbooks is great claims with no real evidence. Well, let's go to logic error number 2, commonly used by the evolutionists in their discussions. I call this the half-truth. In other words, it's half true and half false. In other words, a half-truth is many times more effective than what we call the complete lie. It mixes half-truth with some legitimate information. Let me give you an example here. This is an example I find in textbooks, and I find it on the evolutionist websites too. I'm not going to promote their websites, so I'm not going to give the URLs, but they do have several websites out there, and I can tell almost within 2 minutes of a discussion with an evolutionist that that's where they got all their information from, their websites. And you know, once I know that, it's very easy to beat them in a discussion, because their own websites set their own people up for failure. Let me give you the example here of the half-truth. The second law of thermodynamics only applies to isolated systems, so it is not relevant to evolution because the Earth is an open system. Well, it does apply to isolated systems, but it also applies to open systems. That's the half-truth right there. You see, it's half true, half false. Anybody that's worked in the area of heat energy, the area of thermodynamics, which is heat energy, the study of heat energy, knows fully well that the second law works in all types of systems. Now, what do I mean by the second law? What the second law basically says is that over time, everything's losing its available energy for doing work. Kind of like what happens to us at the end of the day. Isn't that right? At the end of the day, we've lost a lot of energy. We need to gain some energy back. So we eat, we drink, and we go out there and get some sunshine. But the second law is also referred to as everything's in decay. Everything's going downhill. But the evolutionists say, no, that only applies to isolated systems where we can't add any energy to it. But you know, that's a complete denial. That is a complete denial that every one of us is decaying. That's a complete denial that people grow old and decay. Because, folks, we all live in what's called an open system. Now, what I mean by an open system is this. Here's your little teaching thing on this. An open system is any system that we can add energy to it, or matter or energy into it. Now, certainly on the Earth, the sun adds energy into the Earth, doesn't it? So it's an open system. And the evolutionists are denying that things are decaying in that open system. How unscientific can we get? Folks, is there any evidence out there anywhere for evolution other than pictures drawn in textbooks? So we've had fuzzy words and we've had the half-truth. Let's go to number 3. Logic error number 3. I call this the bandwagon. This is the appeal to everyone agrees. Here's your example. All scientists accept evolution. No real scientist accepts creation. Now, anybody making that statement is misinformed, folks. They are completely misinformed. They should not be teaching science anywhere because they don't understand where we got all our science today. You know, most all our modern science today came out of Bible-believing Christians. How about that? Almost all our science today came out of Bible-believing Christians. How about Copernicus, Kepler, Galileo, Newton, all young Earth creationists? I think they were pretty good scientists. Most of our founders of modern science were Bible believers. You know, there's over 1,000 scientists today that have PhDs in physics, chemistry, biology, that believe in a literal 6-day creation. So this idea that no real scientists accept creation, or all scientists believe in evolution, is a logical fallacy. And that's what we call the bandwagon. They're jumping on the bandwagon. Well, let's go to number 4. Logic error number 4 used by evolutionists, called the glittering generalities. Now, incidentally, again, we'll have these posted on our website later tonight or early tomorrow morning, so you can just download all these. Number 4, glittering generalities. What this is, it's a broad oversimplification of an explanation, a broad oversimplification of what you're trying to explain. Let me give you the example here. Scientists may agree about the mechanism of evolution, or may disagree about them. Excuse me, let me say that again. Scientists may disagree about the mechanism of evolution, but all agree that evolution is a fact. In other words, what they're saying here is they don't understand how evolution happened, but they still agree it's a fact. So therefore, don't discuss the mechanism, just believe it as a fact. Folks,